Someone sent the CEO a 6-page document. It named the fraud, it named the people, it named exactly where the money was going. He read it, then he buried it. That memo wasn't ignored because of incompetence. It was buried because the system, the board, the auditors, the lawyers, the regulators had already been engineered to let this happen. And here's the question this video is going to answer. One that prosecutors, regulators, and even academicians still can't fully resolve. Was Enron a crime, or was it a system that worked exactly as designed? Because the answer changes everything, including what's being built right now today, in ways no auditor on Earth can currently detect. On the 2nd of December 2001, the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history was filed. Not because a business failed, but because its own CFO stole from it. Enron, once valued at $70 billion and celebrated on every magazine cover in the country, collapsed to a stock price of 26 cents in 6 weeks. The weapon wasn't market forces. It was a web of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to a tiny British territory in the Caribbean. In 1976, the Cayman Islands passed the Confidential Relationships Preservation Law, making it a criminal offense to disclose unauthorized financial information. This was not a loophole. It was a fortress wall built by statute. That law turned the Caymans into the world's premier hiding place for corporate liabilities. Decades later, Enron's lawyers didn't stumble upon it. They built their entire scheme around it. The island's legal secrecy was the foundation, not an afterthought. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Enron was engineering a different kind of illusion. On January 30th, 1992, the SEC granted Enron Gas Services permission to use mark-to-market accounting. In plain terms, they could book the projected profits from a 20-year energy contract on day one, before a single dollar was ever collected. The mechanism was elegant and predatory. Enron signs a deal to supply natural gas for a decade. Analysts model the future cash flows. Enron books the entire estimated profit today. The stock surges. Executives collect bonuses, and then reality has to catch up. And it never does. Wall Street was hypnotized. Fortune named Enron America's most innovative company 6 years in a row. The stock climbed to $90.75 per share. Analysts who questioned the numbers were dismissed or pressured. The machine needed fuel, and the fuel was debt that had to be hidden somewhere. Enter Andrew Fastow. Enron's chief financial officer was not just managing the books, he was rewriting the laws of gravity for corporate accounting. He found his weapon in an obscure 1990 accounting rule called EITF 9015, which allowed a company to keep a special purpose entity completely off its balance sheet as long as an outside investor put in just 3% of the capital. 3%. That's all it took to make billions in debt legally disappear from Enron's public filings. And here's the twist that should make every investor's blood run cold. That outside 3% was often secretly funded by Enron itself. The rule designed to ensure independence was being fed by the very entity it was supposed to watch. Fastow built a labyrinth. Dozens of SPEs, each registered in the Cayman Islands, each carrying a chunk of Enron's toxic debt. They had names like Chitty, Chiuco, Raptor, and LJM. Names that sound like science fiction because the accounting was fiction. Fastow's lawyers deployed an essentially powerful Cayman tool, the Star Trust, legalized in 1997. Special Trust's alternative regime allowed the creation of purpose trusts with no identifiable human beneficiary. No owner on paper. No name for auditors to chase. The shell had no shell. The first major test was Chiuco. In November 1997, Fastow created this Cayman-registered SPE and handed operational control to his subordinate, Michael Copper. Copper was Enron's own employee, acting as the supposed independent outside party that made the whole structure legal. He personally pocketed $10.5 million from that single entity. The conflict of interest was not a bug, it was the entire engine. Fastow was simultaneously Enron's CFO, the manager of the entities Enron was selling assets to, and the man personally profiting from every transaction. He was sitting on both sides of every negotiating table, and Enron's board knew it. On June 28, 1999, Enron's board of directors took an extraordinary step. They formally voted to waive the company's own conflict of interest code so that CFO Fastow could personally run the LJM Cayman partnerships. This was not a clerical oversight, This was a deliberate decision documented in board minutes made by 12 sophisticated executives who understood exactly what they were authorizing. By this point, LJM had evolved into Fasto's personal profit machine. He had extracted over $30 million in management fees and self-dealing profits, not from the market, not from performance, but from the spread between what Enron sold assets for and what Fasto's entity paid. Every transaction was a transfer from shareholders to him, and Enron's external auditor, Arthur Anderson, signed off on all of it. The firm earned $52 million in fees from Enron in 2000 alone, more than half of it for consulting work that created a devastating incentive to approve whatever the client asked. Anderson was not the watchdog, it was the accomplice. Inside Enron, not everyone was blind. On August 15, 2001, Vice President Sharon Watkins sat down and typed a 6-page memo to CEO Ken Lay. She warned him in direct language that the company would implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She named the Raptor SPEs specifically. She named Fasto specifically. That memo was not a rumor, it was a map to the crime scene. Lay received the memo. His response was to refer it to the law firm that had helped structure the very transactions Watkins was warning about. The investigation went nowhere by design. Within 90 days, the entire structure would detonate anyway. Because the SEC had already started asking questions, Fasto could not answer. On October 16, 2001, Enron made an announcement that shattered confidence in a single afternoon. The company disclosed a $1.2 billion reduction in shareholder equity, a restatement tied directly to the SPE accounting. In one press release, the entire illusion cracked open. Analysts who had championed the stock suddenly couldn't explain the basic structure of the company they'd been selling. What followed was a textbook bank run, but in slow motion. Counterparties pulled credit lines, lenders demanded collateral, Enron's credit rating was cut to junk. Each downgrade triggered new contractual clauses that demanded more cash Enron didn't have. The SPEs, designed to absorb debt, were now detonating in sequence, each one accelerating the next collapse. By the end of November 2001, Enron's stock had fallen from $90.75 to 26 cents per share, almost down by a drastic 99%. 20,000 employees lost their jobs. Their 401k retirement plans, heavily concentrated in Enron stock that management had urged them to hold, were virtually wiped out. The people who built the machine were the last to be told it was burning. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the largest in US history at that moment, with $63.4 billion in assets. The Houston skyscraper that had once served as a monument to American corporate ambition became a symbol of something else entirely, the price of unmonitored complexity. The criminal prosecutions that followed were extensive. Andrew Fasto pleaded guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy and was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. He testified against Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling. Lay died of a heart attack before sentencing. Skilling served 12 years. Arthur Anderson, the auditor, was convicted of obstruction of justice and ceased to exist. Congress responded with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, the most sweeping overhaul of corporate governance in 70 years. CEOs and CFOs were now personally required to certify the accuracy of financial statements under criminal penalty. The 3% SPE loophole was closed. Auditor independence rules were rewritten. However, the underlying appetite for financial engineering never disappeared. In November 2022, FTX collapsed in a near-identical pattern. Sam Bankman-Fried used a sister trading firm called Alameda Research as his own version of Fasto's Cayman SPEs, routing customer funds into a related entity that absorbed losses and printed artificial balance sheet strength using self-created FTT tokens. The architecture was modernized. The fraud was identical. The threat is accelerating. In February 2024, a multinational firm lost $25 million after an employee was deceived by a deepfake video call. The company's CFO and colleagues perfectly synthesized by AI. The approval chains and identity verification systems that Sarbanes-Oxley demanded can now be bypassed by a convincing AI-generated face. Fasto needed a board waiver. Today's fraudsters need a GPU. In 2024, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners issued a stark warning. Generative AI can now construct synthetic corporate networks, entire offshore shell company ecosystems with fabricated financial histories, faster than any audit team can investigate them. Enron took years to build its labyrinth. An AI can generate one overnight, and the traditional audit will see only what it was designed to see. Andrew Fastow did not invent greed, he invented infrastructure for greed, a legal, jurisdictional, and accounting architecture so precisely engineered that it required a waived ethics code, a complicit auditor, a captured board, and a whistleblower memo ignored for 90 days before it finally broke. The real reason of Enron is not that one man stole millions, it's that the system was designed to let him.